Hello everyone, Quentin here with Eagle 3D Streaming. We have a great video for you today. In this video, I will show you how to set up your instance for pixel streaming using a method that works both on g4dn and G5 series. Let's jump right into it. Alright, so now we have both the instances that we can pixel stream and we know how to identify our regions. The next thing we want to do is to hop into AWS and create our first instance. But before we do that, we have to first log into the console and request capacity for that instance. So I'm going to go ahead and sign into my console right here. So going to just go ahead and do this. All right, and now I have signed into my console. Once I'm in here, I have to first check to make sure that I have the quota request the quota available for my instance. So the way I do that is I like to just type quota, and then I will go to quota service quotas. Once I'm here, then I go over and I select the EC2 quota right here, and then I like to type in this command, which is a running on demand G instances. And once I do this, then I will be able to see how much quota I have available for the G series. And the reason why I'm interested in the G series is, if you'll remember, we are going to be using the G series, so they start with the letter G. For pixel streaming, and the reason I'm selecting on demand is generally that's the one that you'll start with, because you're allowed to turn the instance on and off and you only pay for however much you use. Of course, there are other options like on demand and spot series, but usually on demand is the place where you'll want to start. The first thing that I'll want to do is I will first, of course, select this, and then I also want to make sure that I'm in the appropriate region. So since I'm pixel streaming out of Oregon today and I'm going to use an on-demand G series, I make sure I've got Oregon and this typed in, and then I just click this, and then I click request quota increase and I enter in the vCPU value. How many vCPUs do I need? It's going to depend on how many instances you would like to create. In this case, the 2x large is 8 vCPU cores. So if I want one instance, then I would have to request a quota of 8. If I want 5 instances, then I would need a quota of 40. 8 times 5 is 40, so I would need a quota of 40. Just double check and make sure that you know how many instances you're planning on creating, and then go ahead and submit the request. I already have 40 there, so I'll do a number higher than I currently have just for demonstrative purposes to show you what happens. The first thing that happens is you'll receive a notification right here showing that the status is pending. And this will typically last maybe about a minute or so. And then after the request has been received and accepted, you will see an update on this page. Let's see if we can get it. There we go. Okay, so now the quota has been requested. Now we have to wait until the quota is approved. Depending on how new your AWS account is, will impact how fast your quota gets approved. If your account is new, you're probably going to have to bug the capacity request team, because they tend to release lower capacities to newer accounts. So what we like to do is go into the case ID support ticket is automatically created. Go into here, just click reply and type a message explaining who you are, your use case, how you're going to use the instances, very nice and professional, just so they know that you're a human and you know what you're doing, and then that will increase your chances of receiving capacity. Now that we have selected our AWS instance region and have the necessary quota for pixel streaming, the next thing we're going to do is to show you how to set up your instance for pixel streaming. And the method I'm going to show you works on both the G4 and the G5 instance. And not only that, this method will help ensure that you're always getting the latest drivers. The method that I'm showing you is a very solid method. It's flexible, it works on all instances, and so this should be able to provide a method for you to use pixel streaming on any instance that you would like. First thing that I want to do is go over pricing briefly so we're all aware. I'll provide this link in the description. I go to the pricing page. I first select my region. So I'm streaming in Oregon. I select Oregon. The operating system in this case will be Windows. The instance type will be accelerated computing, and I am targeting an 8 vCPU machine. After specifying these fields, we have both the G5 2X, which is $1.58 for on-demand pricing, and the g4dn 2X, which is $1.12 per hour. Just sharing this so you're aware that this is how AWS prices your instances when you're using on-demand instances. After I have reviewed pricing, I'm ready to create my image for my EC2 instance. The first thing that I do is I click EC2, and then once I'm at this screen, then I click on Launch Instance, and then I click on Launch Instance again. And I'm taken to this screen where I am now going to create my EC2 instance. Some of you may be tempted to use one of the NVIDIA pre-made AMIs from the marketplace. An AMI is an Amazon Machine Image, and these are the images that are used to build your EC2 instances. If I type in NVIDIA and then go to the marketplace, you'll see that I have quite a few options for pre-made AMI instances provided by NVIDIA. The problem with these is that they will only work on some instances, and in some cases the drivers aren't updated. I would recommend creating your instance from scratch, and the reason is because this is a method that will work across all instances, all different types of GPUs, and you're always going to get the latest driver. So instead of trying to go for a pre-made instance, let's create one from scratch. It will save you a lot of headache in the future. I'm going to go back to my console home, and then I'll click on EC2 again, and I'll click on Launch Instance and Launch Instance just to get back to this screen. Once I'm at this screen, instead of searching for a pre-made AMI, I'm actually going to create one from scratch. The first thing that I do is I pick my operating system, and again, this demo is going to be for Windows. If you guys want a Linux demo, let me know and we will get you a tutorial for Linux as well. Just put it in the comments. I select Windows operating system because I will be pixel streaming on Windows, and after I have selected that, then I select the AMI. I can click the drop down and it will provide me a few options. Typically I'm picking the latest operating system, which is 2022, and I always select base. Your other options could be 2019 base or 2016 base if you have reasons or preferences for these operating systems, but for this case I'm just going to pick the latest OS from Windows, and the next thing I'm going to do is to select my instance type. I again click the drop down, and then I will type in g4dn, and I am going to select the g4dn 2x large. This demo, I'm going to use the g4dn 2x large to show you how to set up your instance for pixel streaming, but you could just as well pick any other instance. So for example, you could also go for the G5 2x large if you wanted, or if you have another instance that you're targeting. This method is going to work on all of them. Now, another thing to note is that if you do not see the instance that you would like, if it's grayed out, for example, then double check your region to make sure that that instance is available in that region. Sometimes those instances aren't available, so just double check your region to make sure that it is available. Next thing I'm going to do is to create my key pair. Now, I'm assuming that for this demo, I'm doing everything from scratch just so you have all the information, but you could use an existing key pair if you already have one. But for this demo, I'm going to show you how to create a key pair. And the reason we need a key pair in this case is because in the context of pixel streaming, we will use this key pair to RDP, or remote desktop, into your virtual machine. So we actually have to first create a key pair that we can then use to generate a password for your RDP. That will make sense later on, but for now we are going to have to create a key pair. The way to do that is hover your mouse over this, create new key pair, and click, and then select RSA and .pem, and then name your key pair. So I'll just call it my pixel streaming key pair. After I have my name, RSA.pem, I click create key pair. After I do that, it will prompt me to save it, and this is very important. Make sure you save it, and make sure you remember where you save it, because you only get the chance to save your key pair once. I guess it's a security thing with AWS, so if you ever misplace or lose your key pair, then you have to go back and generate a new key pair, and any instances associated with that key pair you'll no longer be able to RDP or remote desktop into them. So make sure you save your key pair at this point, and make sure you always know where that key pair is. In this case, I'm just going to save it to my desktop. So now I've saved my key pair, all is good. And the next thing I'm going to do is the network settings. And in this case, I'm also going to create a security group from scratch so that we're all familiar with this process, but you could use an existing security group if your organization already has one. The first thing I'm going to do is select create security group and then click edit. Then the next thing is I will go down here and I will name my security group. And a security group is basically the rules that specify inbound and outbound traffic within your EC2 instance. So I'm going to call this my pixel streaming security group. I'm also going to use this as my description. And then I'm going to set my inbound rules. Now, this is a demo video, so I'm going to just allow all TCP and all UDP traffic. Obviously, this is not intended for production. This is just a demo. Discuss with your IT team on the most appropriate security rules for your organization. The first thing I'm going to do is select type all TCP, and then I'm going to add another security group, and I'm going to allow all UDP. And then for source type, I'm going to change this to anywhere. If we review this now, the two security group rules that you'll need are to allow all TCP and all UDP anywhere for your security group. And again, this is just for demo. I know that your IT team will probably have other preferences for this, so just discuss with them. All I'm trying to do is to get you up and running with pixel streaming as fast as possible. After I have configured my security group, the next thing I'm going to do is to configure my storage, and I'll just bump it up to 100, and that will allow you to have one Unreal Engine game on your instance that you're pixel streaming of about 5 to 10 gigabytes big. After I have finished configuring my storage, I click Launch Instance, and we will see that the instance has now launched, and you will see a hyperlink to view that instance. And I'll go ahead and click this, and this will take me to the instance dashboard, and I can see now that my instance is now running. If for some reason you don't see the hyperlink, or if you accidentally click somewhere else, the way to get back to this screen is always start at your console home. So go back to home and then click on EC2, and all of your instances will always be under the EC2 category. I click EC2, and then after I am at the EC2 dashboard, I click Instances. And once I am here, then I will see my instance. which is right here. If you don't see your instance, double check and make sure you are in the right region, because AWS only shows the instances per region. So if you do not see it, double check and make sure that you're in the right region. Now that we have the instance created, the next thing we're going to do is to RDP into the machine so that we can set up our drivers and download our game onto the instance. In order to RDP into the machine, I have to first select this instance, and I just do that by left clicking, and then I click connect. After I click connect, I go over to RDP client, and I would download the remote desktop file, and I also need to get my password. Now, the thing with AWS is sometimes after I create my instance, and I click on get password, you will see a message that says your password is not ready, check back in 4 minutes or something like that. If that happens, just wait a little bit, and I've found that it actually can take up to 20 minutes sometimes for this screen to display what I'm showing right here. So if you see a message that says check back in 4 minutes, I would go get coffee or lunch, because it can sometimes take up to 20 minutes before your password's available. I got insanely lucky this time that it's already giving me the option to decrypt my password. Okay, so let's go ahead and RDP into the machine. I'm going to start from scratch just to make sure we're all clear. Console home, go to EC2, go to instances running. I check my region, I'm in the right region. I click my instance, I click connect, and I click RDP, and the first thing I need to do is to download my remote desktop file. So I just click that, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my password. So I click get password, and it gives me the option to upload private key file. And this is that file that we were talking about, your key pair that you need in order to RDP into the machine. So I hope you saved it, because now you need it. I click upload private key file, and I go to where I have saved it. So here's my private key file, and I double click on it, and I click decrypt password. And now you can see that I have the password for that instance. That means that I am now ready to remote into that instance. So the first thing I will do is the remote desktop file that I have downloaded, I will double click it. Here, I'll bring it over here on the desktop. So I downloaded this, and now I just double click it. I will see this screen. I will say don't ask me again, and click connect. The next thing I will see is this screen, and what I will do on this screen is I will take the password that I have generated, I will copy it, I will go into this instance, and I will then paste it into there. And I also click remember me, and then I receive this screen. All I do is click don't ask me again for this computer, and I click yes. And now we see that we are remoting into the AWS instance. The first time that I remote into it, it may take a little while to get set up. While this is setting up, I'll go ahead and just lay the roadmap for what we're going to do now that we have RDP'd into this AWS instance. And I just click yes on this. Obviously, it will depend on your IT team's requirements, but I'm just going to click yes. And just to make sure that it's clear, this is a remote desktop of the EC2 instance that I just created in AWS. If I go back to my EC2 instance dashboard, right here, you'll see that there is this instance that I just created on this tutorial that is running, and this remote desktop file that I now have open is this EC2 instance. And I just wanted to make sure that's clear. So now I'm in my EC2 instance, and the next thing that I need to do is to set up my drivers. The first thing that I like to do is to go to Device Manager, and this will be helpful, to check to see what drivers are currently installed, or if a driver is currently installed. You need the NVIDIA drivers to actually pixel stream, so I go to Device Manager, I click the chevron next to Display Adapters, and I see these two Microsoft adapters, but those aren't good enough for pixel streaming. We need the NVIDIA driver, and I can clearly see that there's no NVIDIA driver installed. And this is important. This is sort of your go-to just in case you ever run into driver issues. First thing you'll always want to do, go to Device Manager and see if the actual NVIDIA driver is installed or not. Okay, now that we have access to our EC2 instance, we are ready to begin the process of installing our NVIDIA driver. Now, the method that I'm going to show you requires us to specify AWS credentials in order to download NVIDIA drivers. Some of you may be tempted to simply go to the internet and here, I'll just start. Oh boy. No. These are always fun. Some of you may be tempted to go to the internet and simply try to download the drivers from NVIDIA's website, and this will not work because of licensing issues between NVIDIA and AWS and cloud and this and that. You actually cannot do it this way. So there is a very specific and special way that you have to download your drivers onto your EC2 instance. So don't try to do it this way, which is the intuitive way and the way it should be, because the drivers won't actually work. So instead, the first thing that we have to do is we have to specify our AWS credentials. And basically what we're doing is I'm defining who I am in the eyes of AWS so that I have permission to download the AWS issued NVIDIA drivers from AWS. Before I can do that, I have to tell AWS who I am. And in order for that, I need AWS credentials. And in order to do that, I'm going to minimize my RDP machine and go back to my AWS console. And I'm always going to start at the console home screen. And what we now need to do is to create a user. The way that I do that is I go to IAM. And I'm at the IAM dashboard, and this is where I'm able to create users and then assign certain roles to those users. The first thing that I do once I am at this dashboard is I click users, and I'm going to create a new user through this method, and then after that I'm going to generate AWS credentials associated with that user. Then I can go back into my RDP instance and download the NVIDIA drivers. The first thing that I do after I'm at the users page is I click add users. After I click users, I'll just enter a username and my PSX username, so PixelStream username. After I've done that, I click next. And after I'm at this screen, then I need to attach policies so that this specific user has permissions. So I click attach policies directly, and then I associate specific policies. Of course, for this demo, I'm just going to give this user admin access, but your organization will probably have specific requirements on how policies can be assigned. For this demo, I click attach policies directly, and then I select administrator access. I scroll down to the bottom of the screen, and then I click next. After I click next, I review, and I have my username. I have the associated permissions of admin, and then I click create user. After I click create user, then I can see now that my username has now been added to my list of users. The next thing I'm going to do is to generate my credentials. I do this by clicking on the username, and then I scroll down, I go to security credentials. So I'm in my username and I go to security credentials, and now I scroll down and I create access key. So I click on this, and then AWS will ask me why I'm creating an access key. So I typically click because I'm running some apps on an AWS compute service. I click this, and then I click I understand I am creating an access key, and then I click next. After that, it gives you the option to add a tag. We don't need one in this case, so I'm just going to click create access key, and now I have my access key and my secret access key. And similar to the key pair, you only have the chance once to download this information. So when you're at the screen, make sure that you grab your CSV file and make sure that you place your CSV file in a place where you can easily retrieve it. In this case, I'm just going to download it to my desktop and click save, and now I have my access key and secret access key. The next thing that I am going to do is to add a new profile to my EC2 instance that will allow me to download the NVIDIA drivers. In order to do this, I'm going to follow two important pieces of documentation provided by AWS, which you can see right here. The first piece of documentation, and I'll provide of course the links in the description, is on how to add a new profile, and this is the first step that we are going to do. And then after I add a new profile, the next thing that I'm going to do is install NVIDIA drivers on Windows instances. Now, there is an internal debate within Eagle on to whether we should use the grid drivers or the NVIDIA gaming drivers. In this case, I'm going to install the grid drivers, but you could also install the gaming drivers. Now that I've covered both of these two documentations that I'm going to be following for the next step, we're ready to go back into the EC2 instance and set up download and install our NVIDIA drivers. I'm back in the EC2 instance, and the next thing I'm going to do is to go into PowerShell. And I go to PowerShell ISE, I right click on it, and I click Run as Administrator, and I am at this screen. The next thing I'm going to do is to follow my documentation on how to add a new profile. I'm going to take this information and copy it, and after it's copied, I'm going to go back into my EC2 instance and paste it in. The next thing I'm going to do is, you'll notice that it has a place to specify your access key, secret key, and to store it as a profile. AWS provides examples in the documentation, so we obviously need to add our access key that we just created. Go to your Excel spreadsheet that you downloaded. It will look something like this, and select your access key by just copying it. Go into here and paste your access key to replace the example that AWS provided. And I like to leave a space right here after, so just make sure that it has a space and it looks like this after you paste in your access key. Next thing I do, same thing, I copy my secret access key from my spreadsheet, and I then paste it into the secret access key location. And then I make sure that it's again properly aligned, and then I'm going to change this to store as, and I like to put it as default. After I have specified all this information, I press enter, and it's now running the script, and it takes a little while, so we just have to kind of sit here and wait. Okay, so now it's installed, and the next thing that I need to do is to go ahead and paste. I now have pasted, and I know I did that sort of fast, so I'll wait for this to finish and then I'll show you exactly what I did. What's happening right now is the NVIDIA drivers are being downloaded onto my desktop, and you see the NVIDIA folder right here, which is a good sign. How I did that, because I know I did that pretty fast, my bad you guys, is I went to this documentation, which I will provide the URL in the description, which shows how to install the NVIDIA drivers on Windows instances. Once I'm on this page, I then scroll down to these installation options. Because we are installing the grid drivers, this is where I grabbed that scripting information. Now, if you are installing the gaming drivers, you would instead go to this option. But because we are doing a grid driver installation, I went to option number 3. I then scrolled down to this information. I then took this information and copied it. And then I go to this page and I just pasted it exactly in here, and I only do this after I have specified my access key and secret access key. If I do that properly, then we will see the NVIDIA folder located here on the desktop, which I then double click to open. I double click on latest and we have our driver installation, which I will then double click. After I double click, I just click OK, and now the installation process will begin. And you can see it running in the background. It will take maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes or so to install. So I'll probably remove this piece from the video just so we're not sitting here waiting. But all right, so I'll show this part. Now we have the NVIDIA graphics driver screen. And I click agree and continue and then next. And now we're installing. And here I'll probably pause it. Okay, now that we have the NVIDIA driver installed, that's a great sign. I click close, and then I close this, and I close this, and obviously the next thing that I want to do is I go to Device Manager and I confirm that it's installed, and it is. Woohoo! So we are looking really, really good right now. Now that I have the driver installed, and this is great progress, the next thing I want to do is to download my Unreal Engine application to my EC2 instance. So I'm going to do that right now. I'll pause it, and then once I have the build downloaded onto my EC2 instance, I'll go over that step, and then we are finally ready to start pixel streaming. Alright, so now I've downloaded my game onto my EC2 instance, and all I did was I used Google Drive. I'm sure you'll have a file sharing preference or way of getting your app onto the build. I used Google Drive, I clicked download, and then I downloaded my zipped folder, which contains all built files for my Unreal Engine application. After that was downloaded, I right click on it and I extract all, and now I have the unzipped version of my build files. Let's take a look. I double click on Windows and you can see that it's all the built files. This is for an Unreal Engine version 5.2 application with pixel streaming plugin enabled. And that's the end of today's video. Thank you guys for watching till the end. I will see you all in another future video. Until then, take care.
Upload your first Unreal Engine project on our pixel streaming platform for free. To create an account, go to account.eagle3dstreaming.com/sign up and get a free 7 days trial. Eagle 3D Streaming, it's just easier.